POA community, welcome back everybody. Robert Linkul, trainingtheolderadult.com. Hope you're all doing well. We are looking at Outlive here. This is our fourth edition, our fourth episode, in which we are looking at different statistical components of chapter 11 on exercise. Today we're going to talk about maximal strength outputs. I'm going to read you a section and we will then discuss, okay? The strong association between cardiorespiratory fitness and longevity has long been known. It might surprise you, as it did me, to learn that muscle may be almost as powerfully correlated with living longer. A 10-year observation study of roughly 4,500 subjects, ages 50 and older, found that with low muscle mass, they were at 40 to 50% greater risk of mortality than the controls over the period of the study. Further analysis reveals that it is not the mere muscle mass that matters, but the strength of those muscles, their ability to generate force. It's not enough to build big pecs and biceps in the gym. Those muscles have to be strong. They have to be capable of creating force. Subjects with low muscle strength were at double the risk of death, while those with low muscle mass and or low muscle strength plus metabolic syndrome had a 3 to 3.3 times greater risk of all-cause mortality. Strength may even trump cardiorespiratory fitness, at least one study suggests. Researchers following a group of approximately 1,500 men over 40 with hypertension for an average of 18 years found that even if the man was in the bottom half of his cardiorespiratory fitness, his risk of all-cause mortality was almost 48% lower if he was in the top third in the group in terms of strength versus the bottom third. It's pretty much the same story that we saw with VO2 max. The fitter you are, the lower your risk of death. Again, there is no other intervention, drug, or otherwise that can rival this magnitude of benefit. Exercise is so effective against disease of aging. The horseman, these are part of his philosophies and theories. There's these 4 horseman components that he trains for and that you're looking to overcome, that it has often been compared to medicine. All right, so there's a lot to unpack in that. So let's start back over here. We're talking about the difference between having big muscles and having strong muscles. So you probably heard me talk about this a little bit in the past. There are 2 different terms. There's muscular strength and then there's muscular hypertrophy. Hypertrophy is where you do a certain strategy of volume, a certain strategy of lifting or training where you're trying under fairly heavy load or really high repetition, it just depends on how you can plug it together, where you're trying to rip and tear apart the muscle fibers. And this is good tearing. When people hear that, they go, "Oh my God, you're hurting yourself." And it's not that kind of damage. It's damaging, okay? You're causing damage. That's what makes you sore, right? You tore some of the fibers. There's, in your pecs, there's a billion muscle fibers, okay? There's a ton of them. Let's consider them like 10 piano strings, okay? And they go from my sternum all the way over to my coracoid process, a little bump in my shoulder, okay? And that's my pec. And those 10 strings, right, represent all of those fibers. So every time I do bench press and I do chest flies and I do dips and I do all this stuff where I stretch them, at the end of the day, out of those 10, right, like one of them got torn, right? The other 90% of them, it's probably not even that much, right? But one of them, for this analogy, gets torn. And the body goes, "Oh, we got to rebuild this," okay? And so it puts forth this whole process. Okay, again, I'm not a scientist in those terms. I've always struggled with all the science behind how muscle gets rebuilt. Not my area of expertise. I just know how to build it very well, okay, with our clients. So that one gets torn, and over the next 48 to 72 hours, it starts to rebuild a better binding site, and it brings back that one. And then if you did it right, it brings back another one. And so now you have 11 piano strings. And then you train again, and then there's 12, and then there's 13, and then there's 14. And eventually, your chest is no longer 40 inches, it's 42 inches. And then a year later, it's 44 inches, and you've slowly built. yourself into this big muscular individual. So that's hypertrophy. Our goal is to build by ripping these fibers and building more new binding sites. You are trying to make yourself bigger in musculature. But then you have another style of training that is designed for simple strength development, okay? And that means that you're not necessarily trying to tear the muscle fibers and make them bigger, but those 11 strings that you have, or those 10 strings that you have, you're trying to make a binding site between them, right? Where the two ends of the piano wire come together. You're trying to make those binding sites stronger and stronger and stronger. So think of 11 people shaking, 10 people shaking hands, right? And they all kind of do like the limp fish handshake. Well, the next time it's a little firmer, it's firmer, and eventually you're squeezing each other's hands so damn tight. But there's not more handshakes. They're just firmer handshakes. These are very, very close and they're very similar. It just depends on how you program your reps and your sets and how much weight you use and how much time under tension and all this that we do that will give you either more binding sites, bigger muscles, or a more dynamic or a stronger binding site, more handshakes, okay? So this suggests it's not necessarily about the bigger muscles having more muscle mass, though there are some studies that show the more muscle mass you build up when you're younger, the longer it will carry. Because you don't lose the binding sites, you don't lose the strings, they just shrink in size if you don't use them, okay? That's where you'll see people who are very, very big and muscular at one time. They don't shrink entirely. Like you still go, oh, that guy used to be in good shape. Like you can still see some muscles there. And they're just not as big, okay? Because you still have those binding sites. You still have that, you've built those. They're there. They're just small now. They're atrophying, okay? So once you kind of build those, you can maintain them and hold them through life, ideally. If you have more muscle binding sites early in your 20s and 30s, you have a bigger ration of them to slowly taper off as we age. So the goal now, as you kind of look at this, is do I need to stress my muscles so much where I tear them to where they get bigger? Or should we focus on the stronger handshake? And in those terms, okay, you have a strength focus of learning to apply as much force with your body as you can. So the general kind of guidelines that we look at for that are about 60 to 80% of a maximal effort, or a 6 to 8 out of a 10 scale, right? Reps of rate of perceived exertion. So somewhere between a 6 and an 8 out of 10 being the hardest. Or reps in reserve, somewhere around 6 to 8 reps, okay? Meaning when you get done, you could do probably 6 or 8 more, maybe 4 to 6 more, somewhere in there. Shows that you're working with about 80%, okay? 70 to 80%, something like that. That will typically get you real strong, not necessarily grow a ton of muscle mass on you. Where if you're working with 80, 90 to 100%, and you're doing much longer, eccentric, big time under tension, 3, 4, 5 seconds, deep stretches under heavy load, that's where you're going to tear more muscle fiber, grow bigger musculatures. But on the other end of that, we've also seen studies that suggested people doing sets of 30 reps, right? And still having big hypertrophy gains. The point is, when they get to 27, 28, 29, 30, they're near a 90 to 100% maximal effort for that load. So it doesn't mean 90 to 100% of your one rep, it means 90 to 100% of whatever your rep count is. If you're going for chest flies and you're doing 30 reps, on the 30th rep, you could maybe do 1 or 2 more, but you're pretty damn close to being, that's it, I've got nothing left. Okay, but you still did 30 of them. It's the high perceived effort at the very end that's going to tear the muscle fiber and make it bigger. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to do singles, doubles, triples. You can only do 5 reps or less with super heavy load. You can use lighter loads. It just needs to be near maximal exertion, okay, at the end of that. So what I'm telling a lot of you is you don't need to do that. Your goal is not necessarily to tear fibers and grow bigger and get a bigger neck and have your traps bulge out of your tank top. But you can, but you don't have to. But on the other end, okay, somewhere between that 6 to 8 or 60 to 80% effort will help you get strong, build stronger binding sites, help you maintain the muscle mass you have, make it very strong. You'll probably grow a little bit if you've never trained before. And this is all very beneficial. 4,500 people, okay, were able to reduce their risk by 50% mortality risk by doing that, by just getting stronger muscles. And that, to me, is well worth the investment. Okay, last little bit here, we'll wrap up, was the stat of the, let's see, did I miss it? Oh, yeah, here we go. 48%, 1,500 men over the age of 40 with hypertension, over 18 years when they followed them, if they were in the bottom half for cardiorespiratory fitness, but in the top third for strength, they had a increased quality of life. They had a reduced risk of death and mortality risk equal to what the VO2 testing said. So you either have a very, very high healthy VO2 max or carry enough muscle and produce enough strength later in life. Either effort will basically result in the same thing. The healthier you are, the stronger you are, the longer you're going to live. The healthier you are, the more VO2, cardiorespiratory endured you are, the longer you're going to live. Either way, you're testing your body's energy systems and you're giving these high efforts to keep the system running at maximum efficiency as your body is naturally declining due to age. It doesn't mean we're going to drop off that cliff, as we talked about in the last one. It just means that as we age, we are naturally going to have a little bit of loss every decade, right? And let's say you're at 100% at 30. Okay, by the time you're 40, you could be at 95%. And by the time you're 50, you could be at 90%. And by the time you're at 50, 60, 70, 80, by the time you get to 80, if you're operating at 75 or 70%, that's still awesome. Where the average individual that doesn't train, they're going to be operating at 20%. Okay, maybe not that low, but pretty damn low. Okay, all the way to that point where they're in that disability threshold. They are now reliant on someone else to take care of them. Where if you're 70% of what you used to be in your 30s, fucking A, like that's fantastic. You are completely independent. And maybe you're not a 44-inch chest anymore. Maybe you've shrunk a little bit and you're a 40. But your 6'3" frame is still 6'2.5". That means your body is still winning against gravity. That means your muscle mass is still holding your body upright and keeping you capable of walking and striding and having the gait that you've had and keeping the gait speed that you've had. And being able to manipulate your groceries and carry them in and out of the house and get up and down off the floor and do all the things that you could do when you were 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80. Daily life activities, daily life functions, activities of daily living, whatever you want to call them. The shit that we do every day. You keep your ability to do that, no problem. And hopefully more. Hiking, golfing, swimming, whatever else it is that you want to do. So I hope you enjoyed this one. Good chapter. I mean, we still have a ton to do. So I really enjoy these. I like to be able to take like 1, 2 things and kind of dive into them a little bit. And it seems like a good number of you are enjoying them too. So we'll continue to do this until our next episode. Thank you all for being here. I appreciate you. And we will see you in the next one. Until then, continue to fight your good fight against sarcopenia. Peace.